the idea of the number 3. We were asking that there's a lot of inyanim in the Macher Chodesh that have to do with the number 3. And to explain that, we started getting into the idea of the segel, that the segel vowel sign has 2 dots on the top. The 2 dots on the top, that indicates the level of the 2 nations of Yishmael, and which is Chesed of Klippa, and Gvur of Klippa, which is Esav, which is Koilanit, all the 70 nations. And then you have the point on the bottom, that's Am Yisrael. There being a point on the bottom indicates their bittul, and there, through their bittul, they are mevarer and maila, the level of all the nations that the 2 top nekudas indicate. And that's also the idea of atem tiuli sgula mikol amim. You will be a sgula from the word segal, that you will be the ones that will elevate and refine all the nations. So now the Rebbe is going to continue this idea of the relationship and the connection between the Yidden and the nations. Just as a side point, I found this interesting because this was written, this mimer was said again on the heels of the Yom Kippur War, where Yidden and the nations were in great danger at the hands of the nations, and the Rebbe talks just the opposite about Yidden elevating the nations and so on, as we're soon going to see even more. Top of the 4th page of the Maimer, Ois Gimel, page Ches. Ubir, the Indian explanation of this matter is the Niksiv, it says in the Pasuk, Ki atem hama'at mikol ha'amim. You are the fewest of all the nations. You are the least of all the nations. What does that mean, this idea that you are the least of all the nations? That we are saying, so the least and the fewest of all the nations means shafilu legabe umas ha'olam hem b'chinas ma'at. Even in comparison to the nations of the world, they are considered few. Few, as Chassidus always looks at it, means bittul. So there is, it could have said va'atem hama'at, or ki atem hama'at. You are in a state of bittul. But the Rebbe is going to be medayik. It says over here, ki atem hama'at mikol ha'amim, meaning your bittul is a bittul even in comparison to the nations. So what does that mean? What is a bittul on its own, and what is a bittul that has to do with all the nations? This means not only do they not decrease themselves. In other words, Yidden are in a state of bittul. Though the Yidden get much hashpah, despite that, instead of becoming arrogant from that and becoming filled with ego because of it, they are actually in a state of bittul despite that. But in addition to that, they are bittul even in comparison to the nations of the world. Meaning that they feel bittul, they feel humility, even in regards to a non-Jew. And we'll explain what that means. Like the explanation of the Alter Rebbe in the meaning of the pasuk that says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble person from every person upon the face of the earth, that Moshe Rabbeinu's humility was even in comparison to the nations of the world. This means though he knows, though a Yid knows that he is a member of the wise and understanding nation, and the Torah is our wisdom and our understanding in comparison to the nation. So we have something that the nations don't have. Additionally, that you, Hashem, chose us from all the nations and raised up higher than all the languages. Since the one that is raising them is Hashem, it's a true exalted state. We are truly raised up. So where does the bittul before the nations come about? Still in all, he still considers himself in a state of bittul and humility in comparison to the nations. So the question is, why? What motivates us that way? This will be understood according to what's explained. That Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble person from all people upon the face of the earth. How did Moshe Rabbeinu come to that humility in a true fashion? How was he truly so humble? Since he knew, obviously, that he was the only man in history that ever spoke to Hashem face to face, was on the mountain 40 days, 3 times without eating and drinking. He was the one that received the Torah. He was the one that was the shliach of Hashem to take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, to do all the miracles in the Midbar and the Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf. How could he be more humble? How could he be humble before anybody? So he says the reason how Moshe Rabbeinu was humble, he actually contemplated the fact that he had all these qualities. With those qualities, he was definitely higher than every person. But what he thought about all those qualities is, it's not something he earned. Moshe Rabbeinu thought was that all of these advantages and qualities were things that he was given from Hashem. He thought to himself, if these powers and capabilities were given to someone else, he would have revealed these powers, these capabilities in a greater fashion. Such a type of explanation, if someone else was given my capabilities, they would have been higher, is shaykh also concerning a non-Jew. In other words, if that non-Jew would have been chosen to be a Jew, he would have accomplished much more with his Jewishness than I have. For this reason, Moshe Rabbeinu was humble even in comparison to the nations of the world. And to note, in Pirkei Avos it says that you should be low of spirit, meaning humble, and there's 2 versions of that Maimer Chazal in Pirkei Avos. Some nuschos, some versions say b'fnei kol adam, without the letter hey. Other versions have it b'fnei kol ha-adam, with the additional letter hey. It does include the letter hey in it. So what's the difference between the letter hey or not the letter hey? So there's a Tosfos that explains that when it says Adam, then we use the rule Atem Kriyim Adam ve'ein umas ha'olam Kriyim Adam. When it says Adam without the letter Hey, then it only applies to Yidden. And if it says B'fnei Kol Ha'adam, that Tosfos and Gemara Yevamah says, in that case, Ha'adam is inclusive, and it means also not Jews also. So if we are goyres B'fnei Kol Ha'adam with the letter Hey, so then that means, like we were speaking about before, that you can have this level of humility also before the nations of the world. So, and the Rebbe says that in Tanya, for example, there will be times when he uses the Ha-Adam version and the times when he uses the version of Adam. He says in line 25, in those places, for example in Tanya, that we explain the reason for a person's bittul, and the reason that we explain for the bittul is a reason that's applicable to have bittul even before the nations of the world. So the version that the Alter Rebbe will bring down, we use the word kol ha'adam with the additional letter hey, because shekoi gamal umas ha'olam, because ha'adam also refers to the nations of the world. But those places that we explained the reason for the bittul, that's only applicable for Yidden. What type of bittul is only applicable for in regards to other Yidden? For example, if we use the explanation of Tanya and Perek Lamed Beis, who knows their greatness and quality in their root and source in the living God? That is the reason why we need to have Avos Yisrael, for example, because we don't know, maybe their root and source is higher than mine. So I might think I'm greater, but really that person is greater. And also another reason we have to have Avos Yisrael, the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Lamed Beis, because we are all matching and we have one Father. That has to do with the root of the soul of Yid in one Eibishter. That's the Av Echad L'Kulanu. That's only something applicable by Yidden. That's not something that's shaykh by the nations of the world. So Medaikim Loimar, if we talk about that type of bittul, we say exactly the language Kol Adam Belihe, we say it without a hey. Top of the next page 10, the Koyal B'nai Yisrael Dafke, it's referring specifically to Yidden. Atem Krim Adam, like Chazal say, you are called Adam and not the nations of the world. Why are you called Adam? Why are Dafki Yidden called Adam al Shem Adam al Elyon? Because of the pasuk that says, I am likened to above. That likeness to above is applicable by Yidden because a Yid has a chelak al kamim al mamish. A Yid has a part of Hashem above. But when it comes to bittul, there are types of bittul that are applicable also in regards to the nations of the world. And that's why Bezel Shanamar Vish Moshe Anav Moed Mikhail Ha'adam, but they have to say that's why it says Moshe was the most humble person from every Ha'adam, with the additional letter Hey Asher Apnei Adam, it's on the face of the earth. Ki etzloi hoya habitul anisker le'el sheshayich afil l'gabe umas ha'olam, because by Adam, by Moshe Rabbeinu, was the bittul that we mentioned before, even in regards to the nations of the world. Based on this, we can explain the pasuk that we brought down at the beginning of the Ois. In a similar vein is also the bittul of you are the fewest of all the nations, meaning you are batul, not just in the simple sense, you are more batul than the nations. No, you are batul even in comparison to the nations. You, the Jewish people, have humility and bittul in comparison to the nations. Now the Rebbe takes this a step further. That this bittul, like we said, they are the nekuda under the two nekudas of Esav and Yishmael representing all the nations, which is even in the picture of the segel in that type of way, that it's a bittul that is under the nations. They are batul in regards to the nations. They are lower than the nations. So vayadei habittul should be Yisrael Shem Ma'at Mikol Ha'amim, through the bittul that's amongst the Yidden, that they are the fewest of all the nations. They are batul even in comparison to the nations. Mevarerim Yisrael Kol Ha'amim. The Yidden are elevating or refining all the nations. It's similar to what's explained earlier concerning the image of the letter of the Tmunas oisegel, he's calling it a letter. It means the vowel sign of a segel. They have 2 points, one next to each other, 2 dots next to each other, and one beneath it. It's raising up upon these 2, upon this 1 point of the Eden, they stand. In the segel, there's 2 opposite things. On the one hand, by the segel, the dot is under the 2 nekudas, which shows as if the Yidden are under and lower than Esav and Shmuel, than the nations. Well, the Idach Gisa, on the other hand, the purpose of this dot under those 2 dots is to elevate the nations because of its bittul even before them. Like the well-known example and metaphor from a utensil it's used to raise something up. It's called a lever. Is to be able to pick something up in its entirety. One has to raise it up from the bottom. If you want to pick up something, if you pull it from the top, it might come apart and not all of it will come up. If you want to make sure that everything is raised up, so you need to raise it up from the bottom. The same thing, the letter Yud, the dot on the bottom of the segel, that is underneath it, underneath the 2 dots of the nations, to raise it up higher. So now, the Rebbe says, and what happens to the Yidden? The Yidden that raise up the nations, so what happens? What does the Yid gain out of it? So the Rebbe says in the 2nd paragraph, line 19, in addition to that, after the lower dot of the segel raises up the 2 points on top of it, then it's transformed, and now the segel is flipped over, and the segel now becomes an upside down segel. V'nikras segolta, and it's called a segolta, and the fact that it's called a segolta, which is similar to the word segel, like we mentioned earlier, that 2 words, that their letters are the same, they have a connection in their content. So the fact that the segel, which is the 3 dots under the letter, and the segolta, which is an upside down segel, has the same letters, that means they're connected. What's this segolta? Shu tam hanagina, that is one of the trop, one of the cantillation marks that goes all the way over the letters. The segel is beneath the letters, and the segolta, the trop that is just as an upside down segel, a turned over segel, is one of the cantillations, one of the taimei anagina, taimei the trop. The whole idea of trop, the whole idea of the cantillation. The song shows on delight in enjoyment in Torah study. It says that the Chazal bring down the importance of learning Torah with a song. That's the one of the sources and explanations for reading the Torah with a trop, that because the song indicates one's delight and enjoyment. So from it being a vowel sign underneath, it turns around, the dot is now on top, and it's on top of the letters. Then it turns around, and that single dot, which shows on the Yidden, is higher than the 2 dots which show on the nations of the world. Similar to what's explained about the chirik, which is under a letter, and through avoida you transform and you move the location of the chirik on top of the letter, it becomes a cholam. That shows that now it's a dot that's over the letter, showing that's a higher level even than the letters, instead of being a lower level of the letters. Letters in general, as it's explained, shows on revelation, like we had that principle at the beginning of the Maimer, ois. The word ois is from the word asa boiker, morning came, and so on. The kach nasakan, misegel sagolta, just like through avoida from a chirik becomes a cholam, the same thing through our avoida and through our bittel, the segel becomes transformed into that upside down segel called sagolta that's on top of the letters. That's an idea of pleasure and delight, which is the highest power. Amnam, so what's the difference between the chirik being transformed to the cholam through avoida versus the segel being transformed to the segolta through avoida? So he says, Amnam Sham, by the chirik transforming to the segel, to the cholam, why they avoidim atzmai, it's through a person's avoida within themselves. When they're working within themselves, they go from a chirik to becoming a cholam. That's why a chirik is one point to indicate it's just that thing itself. It doesn't impact anything else. Masha'enke, top of page Yud. Kan, over here, where we're talking about the segel turning into the segolta, the transformation and the elevation is resulting from the avoida with Esav and Shmuel, v'lechein harein sholosh nekudas. Therefore, they are 3 dots, as we said before. This is the idea that it says, you will be, the pasuk we brought earlier, yesterday, you will be a sgula from all the nations. What does sgula indicate? You will be a segel. Through the refining of all the nations, that's hinted in the vowel sign of a segel, Nasim b'nei Yisrael b'chin segolta, so then Yidden become the cantillation of a segolta. The gambin yizeh, just like in the segel we said, there's 2 opposites. The dot underneath is, on the one hand it's underneath, on the other hand it's raising them up. The same thing in the segolta, there's 2 opposites. Shemachad gisem hem sgulam, or in the atem tili sgulam kolam, there's 2 opposites. Not in the segolta. In the atem tili sgula, there's 2 opposites. Shemachad gis on the one hand, hem sgulam mivcharim kolam. On the one hand, we call them a sgula, a special thing from all the nations, which means Yidden are way above them. On the other hand, this itself is a result. How does they attain the level of sgula? How do they go from being a segel to a segalta? Because they are refining the nations. So the Rebbe adds over here an amazing point. And again, taking into consideration that the Yidden were just fighting Yishmael. This is during the 1973 war. And he was saying, Shemazem, moving from this understood, Gama Ilui Vaschar Shal Kola Oamim. Also, the quality and the reward that all the nations get when the Yidden elevate them, and because they elevate the nations, they are becoming elevated. So the nations partake of this reward also. We know a rule that Hashem does not withhold the reward of any creature. Whatever, even minor thing that any creature might do, Hashem doesn't withhold the reward. So if that's true, even in a minor thing, if through them Yidden are elevated, how much more so that Hashem doesn't withhold the reward from the nations, that the nations are, since they are part of what is elevating the Yidden, because Yidden are elevating them, so therefore Yidden become elevated higher, so they will also be rewarded by it as well. And again, I think it's very amazing, especially how the Rebbe chose that time, similar to that Maimer that we were learning, Halus Hashem Kol Goyim, in a similar vein, right in the middle of Sukkot time of the Yom Kippur War.